I've personally tested over 100 vehicles with E15 and E20 and even some with E20 and E30. I can't answer the question as to why there's still that doubt out there. I would say it's probably disinformation and misinformation. We were looking for problems and couldn't find any.
Hello and welcome to Illinois Corn TV. I'm your host today, Shane Gray. Hey, we've had the pleasure today to welcome Brian West. And, when it comes to ethanol or octane or engines, we couldn't have a better guest on here to talk about this new topic or this hot topic that we have going on in America today. Brian, hey, he was the automotive engineer for 31 years at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, where he served as the deputy director for fuels, engines, and emissions research. He's also the 2020 award winner for ethanol excellence by the Illinois Corn Growers Association. So, Brian, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Shane.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to start with an easy one here. We hear this a lot. Ethanol and octane are I would say, real popular right now, so to speak. It's out there, and you hear a lot of people talking about it that maybe have never talked about it before. What do you think is probably the biggest myth that you hear about ethanol that just won't die? It just won't go away.
One of the biggest myths I hear is that it takes more energy to produce a gallon of ethanol than it yields, or that it does not produce lower net carbon emissions than gasoline. And those are both just patently false. People still cite some discredited publications that are like 40 years old on this topic, but I believe the Department of Energy, the Department of Agriculture, national labs, Argonne and Michael Wong have researched this extensively. Today's corn ethanol is more than 47% sunshine. That's the way I like to put it. The rest of the energy in that gallon of ethanol came from natural gas, which is lower carbon than petroleum. So a modern ethanol plant is producing ethanol that's at least 50% lower carbon than today's gasoline.
Right. And ethanol has become a hot topic right now, especially with some of the things that are going on in the United States with Congress and some of its advancements in the way of becoming a year-round possibility. Um, the other topic that comes up with that ethanol is octane. And I don't know that sometimes people understand the relationship between the two. So why has octane become such an important issue, especially in this ethanol world?
Ethanol has a very high chemical octane number, and it's and of course it's available at about in today's prices about half the price of gasoline. So it's a really good thing to put in your gasoline. It boosts the octane. It can save the refiner money. Can certainly save the consumer money at the pump. So and ethanol also has a very high heat of vaporization. What that means is when the fuel's evaporating in the combustion chamber in the intake manifold, it's cooling the air, making the air denser, which can help you make more power and make more power more efficiently. So something I'm really in favor of is, some octane legislation. The past few Congresses, we did have the Next Generation Fuels Act in Congress, and I'd love to see something like that get introduced again because it just gives the manufacturers a tool to make cars that we want to buy, make them more efficient, and of course, ethanol is good for the environment. It's good for the rural economy, and good for the nation. Because it reduces petroleum imports.
Right. So, you know, uh, I know there was some recent legislation that was passed where I think it was Democrats and Republicans, along with all members from Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, and maybe Kansas. I'm not for sure what that fourth one was. That all agreed that ethanol E15 was a good thing. So I mean, I think that ought to tell people something when you can get both sides of the aisle in four different states all agreeing that hey, this is something that needs to happen. There's clearly a significance with E15 use in this country.
Yeah, there is. I worked on the mid-level ethanol blends program when I was at Oak Ridge. It was a big DOE program that helped E15 become legal. EPA cited our work. when they made E15 a legal fuel. And, if you wanted a 30-second or elevator speech on why that matters to the everyday driver, I'd say choosing E15 over E10 today is going to save you money. It's going to improve your air quality. It's going to reduce petroleum imports, and it's going to support the rural U.S. economies.
Why do you think there's still a little bit of pushback from consumers where you might hear, I know I see it on social media occasionally, where I wouldn't put E15 in my motor, it's going to ruin my engine. Why is there still that stereotype up there or that fear of E15 when the research clearly is showing, for those of us who maybe look at it or study it on a daily basis, that that's not the case?
Well, we certainly have done the testing, and certainly not for a lack of looking. We looked for problems, looked for every problem we could think of. We did a literature review. I've personally tested over 100 vehicles with E15 and E20, and even some with E20 and E30. So the I can't answer the question as to why there's still that doubt out there. I would say it's probably disinformation and misinformation from people that don't want to see us succeed. But when we took 18 vehicles, we took the engines out of them and did this thorough inspection. There's a report out there. You can get it online. It's called Powertrain Component Inspection from the Mid-Level Blends Program, where we took all these engines apart, analyzed everything, and we just didn't find any problems. We were looking for problems and couldn't find any. So E15 or E20 is not going to hurt your car. In fact, I wish that growth had asked for an E20 waiver. If we had an E20 waiver on the books right now, we'd be in a much better situation with regards to some future octane legislation, just because of
Right.
the octane won't get from E20.
That's something I've always heard as well. If if sometimes getting legislation passed on higher blends or higher levels of ethanol is difficult, why don't we just push for higher blends of octane, and then the ethanol blend increase just kind of comes along with that? Is there any truth in that type of
There certainly
thinking?
should be. It's the lowest cost, most environmentally sound octane source there is for motor gasoline. So I think if you did have a higher octane standard, um, a lot of your blenders would certainly choose to make that with ethanol. So I think a performance based standard, as you say, Shane, would be a good way to go. If you have this is the requirement for octane, and then let the refiners produce it whichever way they choose. And if they want to choose the most economical, that would be the way to go.
One of the things I also hear is that, well, if it's not bad for my engine, it's not as fuel efficient. It's not going to get the miles per gallon that a regular gasoline or a standard 87 would get. How much truth, if any, is there to that statement?
So that's a valid argument. When we did our mid-level ethanol blends program, we were testing cars that were, today, 15 years old or so. But so they were all large displacement, naturally aspirated engines with port fuel injection. And with E20, we'd see about a 5% loss in miles per gallon compared to E10. Uh, but in a more recent study where we looked at E15 and E10 in California vehicles that were only a few years old, there was no loss in fuel economy and even a small gain. So the point with if we had a new performance-based octane standard, and you chose to
Right.
produce that fuel with, say, 25% ethanol, we've done experiments and have shown that we can get the same miles per gallon with E25 that you would get in today's vehicle with E10 because of the improved power and efficiency that you get with that higher octane and the engine that's designed for it. And of course,
Right.
if you do that, now the manufacturers could maybe make the engine a little bit smaller because they're making more power and then get even better fuel economy.
Right. So, and the way I always kind of thought about that when I would read the research as well and find out that, well, there might be a difference in fuel efficiency as far as miles per gallon go. The thing that I noticed probably most was that whatever difference there is, it was small, but it was the price per gallon at the pump is where you were making up any difference whatsoever.
That's an excellent point. In the laboratory, we could, I had a great driver and a great team, and we could measure 1% and 2% changes in miles per gallon in the lab. But I defy any consumer to do that on the street. You're just not. You're drive, you're not going to notice that. And as you said, your dollars per mile is going to be less with a higher blends.
Is there a year or is there an age of a car that ethanol may have a difference in, its efficiency and its ability to operate your vehicle compared to like the newer cars that are just a few years old? I mean, is there a number out there that a consumer could look at and go, okay, well my car's a 2010 um, ethanol. E15 is going to be perfectly fine in it.
Yep. Based on our research, EPA says 2001 and newer. And, 2001 is a 25-year-old car. So there's not a whole lot of those out there.
Right.
Mm, but certainly a 2010 is going to be fine. And since we completed our work and EPA made their ruling in 2010, most of the manufacturers are now listing E15 in their manuals anyway.
Are we not doing a good enough job ourselves of simplifying the process at the pump, or what are your thoughts on that?
I'm embarrassed to admit that we don't have E15 here in Tennessee, so I don't see it very often. I was traveling one time. I think I was in North Carolina, and they had E15, and I wanted to buy it, and I was confused by the dispenser. And I'm a car guy, but
That's
there's
same here.
certainly not standardization out there, and state to state there might be variability in whether you can dispense them from the same hose or a different hose.
Right.
Um, I think what one thing I've learned from some of these meetings that I attend is that the unleaded 88 marketing campaign has really been successful. Consumers pull up there and they're used to seeing higher prices with the higher octane number, and they see the 88 octane number a little bit higher than the 87, and it's you know 10, 20, 30, 50 cents cheaper, sometimes a dollar cheaper, even depending on the state.
What are the technical advantages of, say, like an E15 to an E30 when it comes to modern engines and stuff like that? I mean, what does our consumer need to know about, the engine and those higher blends of ethanol?
That's a tough question. Um,
That's why I ask you because I don't know the answer to this one.
Well, E15 is, per EPA, E15 is legal for everything 2001 and newer. E30 is technically not. That's really just for flex fuel vehicles. But like I said before, we've done a lot of research. When I was at Oak Ridge, we did a lot of research with E30 because you can make 100 RON uh, gasoline with 30% ethanol in today's blend stock. So if you
Right.
design the engine for it, you can have terrific power and efficiency. Um, which is a little bit harder to get with E15 because you're only gonna have maybe 1 point of octane boost.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If we were, let's say you and I were able to make the decision and sign off on the paperwork and say E15 is going to be offered year round at all gas stations and all pumps around the US. How soon would consumers see that actually happen? I mean, how long would it take for them to be able to actually get that at the pump?
Yeah, that's outside my wheelhouse, shame. I don't know, it's a shame it's taken us, 15 years to get from E15 being legal to just having, 4,500 or 5,000 dispensers out there. One thing I do know is that some of the dispenser manufacturers sundowned their E10 dispenser. That is, they don't produce E10 dispensers anymore. For since about 2016, the vast majority of the dispensers, even if they're dispensing E10 or E0, they're compatible with E25. So there's a lot of dispensers out there that could be dispensing E15, almost overnight. Um, and I
So it
don't,
would be
I'm,
just a matter of filling the tank with an E15 blend.
I believe so, yeah, and people say, "Oh, well, there's an infrastructure issue." I was like, we already have a gasoline infrastructure, we already have an ethanol infrastructure, we're already trucking, we're moving ethanol around by trains and then moving it around by trucks, um, to the stations, so, it doesn't seem like as challenging a thing as, the problems we've seen with trying to get EV chargers all over the country or, you know, people talk about hydrogen being a fuel. Um, that's a really heavy lift. I think moving to a higher ethanol blend is really pretty straightforward compared to some of those other alternatives.
Right. Right. Yeah. And the E15 for me, it's just always made sense, not just as a farmer who grows corn and obviously would like to have an additional option for a market there. But when you think about this can be just as efficient and can be cheaper per gallon, especially at a time when we're paying more at the pump than what we have ever paid. We grow it here, we can manufacture it here, we can ship it here. I mean, everything with E15 to me is just an absolute positive and a no-brainer.
I agree. Like I said, it's good for your air quality. It's going to save you money. Going to reduce petroleum imports. Supports the farmer. I mean, it's good for you, good for your environment, and good for the nation.
So, not to be corny, but why did the gas station invite corn to its party?
I don't know.
Because it heard ethanol really knows how to blend in. Not bad, huh? I can't take credit for that one. That was probably one of the better ones we've had. So
That is one of the better ones I've
that
heard.
worked out pretty good. Well, anyway, hey Brian, I hope the folks who are listening and watching this learn a little bit about ethanol and the importance of ethanol and really how this is a make sense step in the right direction. And again, I want to thank you for all the information and all your expertise on this. I know you've been doing the real testing, not the farming part of it, but you've been in the engine and the automobile, and that's where it really matters. So thank you for all the information today.
Yep. Well, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Absolutely. We'll see you down the road here.
Okay.